Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from lastcar.info, and this is the live stream coming at the conclusion of a thrilling Atlanta finish between Kyle Busch and Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch coming out ahead of his brother, so they are now apparently tied with 2 wins apiece when they have finished 1-2 in a race, at least pending post-race inspection. Kurt himself coming back from finishing last in the spring race here earlier this season, the race that was won by Ryan Blaney. This time around, Kurt seemed to have the real measure of the field. Kyle Busch was challenging him there. Ross Chastain, Kurt's teammate, ended up playing a role in the finish. And not even a couple of weeks even after Trackhouse's announcement that they had acquired Chip Ganassi for both of their charters next year, a very interesting set of circumstances come about for the finish. Of course, we'll also talk about the last place finish battle there at the same time. It turned out to be very quickly solved because of the accident that happened at the very beginning between Daniel Suarez, Cody Ware, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Stenhouse coming back out of the garage area, spinning about at least, I think, about 30 or 40 laps in the garage area. Ultimately pulling off the track in the last couple laps. We'll see in the actual official results if they still list that as him finishing under power or if he merely pulled the car into the garage area. He was pretty much assured of finishing in last place when there was so little attrition that him running 60 plus laps down was enough for him to lock it up with about 60 laps to go in the race. And ultimately, at least unofficially, that is the running order for the back of the field there. Stenhouse now continuing a streak of 3 last place finishes in a row for JTG Daugherty Racing, which should sound familiar to those of you who are longtime viewers of this show. Certainly last July, Ryan Preece himself, his teammate, had 3 straight last place finishes. Stenhouse extended that to 4 at Kentucky, and then that streak ended at New Hampshire, where none other than Kyle Busch actually finished in last place. Now, a year later, we go into New Hampshire next week before the 2-week break for the Olympics, and we have a streak of 3 in a row, potentially going to 4 in a row for Stenhouse and Preece. So that'll certainly be a story that we'll be following next week as well. Much more than that to talk about for both of the races this weekend here. Have a whole lot to cover there. This is called the Hot Take Stream on here, and that is because if there is anything else that this weekend has been defined by. I might actually put a poll up here while we're doing the stream to figure out what thing are people most upset about after this weekend. Are they upset about the Truck Series race that turned into an absolute crash fest at Knoxville? Are they upset about Kyle Busch wrecking his teammate, accidentally or not, and preventing Hemrick to once again score his first victory, and Kyle Busch winning what may or may not be his final Xfinity Series race? Or the overarching issue that Kyle himself has been very vocal on, the, of course, reconfiguration of Atlanta that's coming up and apparently is probably already starting right as we speak here during this stream tonight. The construction of what may or may not be some kind of a super speedway or whatever on that end. I'd be interested to see what people are actually most upset by. If I don't do that poll here during the stream, maybe I'll do that after the show here tonight and just kind of get people's thoughts on that. But certainly not, I don't think anybody would complain about the finish of this race. This definitely had one of the most competitive finishes to a Cup Series race here, I think, since 2011. The great battle that Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson put on there, again, our battle between, well, it wasn't teammates in this sense today, but drivers with some kind of a relationship there in this sense. Of course, the brothers, Kurt and Kyle Busch this time around. Very exciting to see, and we'll certainly talk about that. Thank you so much again for the super chat here, Beast of Metal. My goodness. A moment of silence for this track surface and configuration. Wait, why are they closing up the surface and steepening the banking? All you need to do is core sample and chemically analyze Charlotte, then avoid that mix. Very good point. And that we will absolutely be talking about that for sure. But thank you again so much, Beast of Metal, for the super chat. I noticed the 47 cents on there for our last place finisher, of course, today, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Unfortunate that Stenhouse is, I know Michael Harvey, one of our longtime followers here of both the website, and I'm not sure if I saw you in the chat here, Mike, but I know that you're frustrated here with Stenhouse having this bad stretch here, and then of course Kyle had his Rutledge Wood segment there about all the crash montage there. I've seen plenty of drivers go through that side of the field there too, but hopefully the tough times are not going to last that much longer for Stenhouse, and he can get some good runs coming up here. We saw him look pretty good at Nashville, but unfortunately, this is, I guess, July is just not a very good month for that team in general. So we'll see what things look like going into New Hampshire and beyond. But yeah, a lot about. There you are, Mike. I see you. There you go. But yeah, sorry to see that for your driver there. But again, that's what happens on this end here. Third last place finish in the last 6 races for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., dating back to our coverage at the Sonoma Raceway, where very much like today, they had an early incident, went to the garage area, did the very best they could to get the car back out there. Unfortunately, something else happened. In that case, it was an engine failure that dropped them out of the race. In this case, quite the opposite. After they had the trip to the garage, looked like they were actually going to finish the race under power, although almost 80 laps down by that point. But it did look like they were pulling off the track with 2 laps to go on the NBC broadcast. You could see him come in, and from there, the laps down counter counted up. It looks like he may be the only DNF from that race, again, pending post-race inspection, and looking to be the first last place finish for the number 47 in a Cup Series race at Atlanta. So yeah, definitely a lot to certainly talk about. We'll go ahead and start off with the race results from the event itself. Again, talking about Stenhouse. Suarez involved in that accident as well, finishing in the 36th spot, finishing 17 laps down. From there, everybody else was not really spending time in the garage area, but just off the pace. Josh Bilicki, much like we saw him at Charlotte, the 52 car being shown for all the wrong reasons, as he was lapped many times here towards the end of this event here. He had some serious handling problems at the beginning of the race here before it started following the 47. Whether or not they were able to fix that, they still ended up finishing under power. However, 12 laps down on the same lap actually as Quinn Half. Half shown in the 35th spot, Bilicki in 34th, Cody Ware rounding out the bottom 5. It must be said, despite the fact that Ware was involved in that incident, and at the very beginning of the race there, he did manage to keep that car out of the wall and still managed to finish around the same spot with a lot of his other teammates and actually ahead of Bilicki here. Ware shown in the 33rd spot on the same lap as Bailey Curry, making a return to the Cup Series this weekend in the number 15 car, and Garrett Smithley in the 53, who had started last initially in the 53 car, seemed to be trailing the field, coming to the green, even behind Martin Truex after his pre-race inspection penalty. But Cody Ware, again, good job not, hitting the wall. It seemed like a lot of people all weekend between the Xfinity Series, the Xfinity Series in particular. His brother Carson Ware had a pretty hard hit to that same barrier there at the Xfinity Series race. And we'll, of course, talk about that as well. Looking further up the rankings here, I was surprised to see Justin Haley so far off the pace. I know the 77 team in general has not quite had the speed of Corey LaJoie's entry in the number 7 this year. But it's disappointing that they've been a bit further back in the lineup, especially with Haley being as good as he's been in the Xfinity Series. Whether I'm wondering if that's an arrangement like Front Row Motorsports has, where Michael McDowell is able to be as consistent as he's been, and Anthony Alfredo is either running slower cars or just kind of getting his feet under him. It seems surprising in this sense because Haley is even more experienced than Alfredo does. But I was surprised to see him that much further back in the lineup. Eric Almirola trying to pull some strategy there with rain in the area. Unfortunately, it shows him 23rd in the finishing order there. Kyle Larson was seen set to another top 5 finish. Maybe not, certainly not a contender for the win all day today. Seemed to be about 8th place before that. But while running in the top 5, had a pit road speeding penalty that dropped him back to the 18th spot. Kind of shadows of the time that he drove the McDonald's car here in Atlanta and had a speeding penalty that took him out of contention. I believe Brad Keselowski won that one. So an unfortunate set of circumstances here. And now for Larson and for the rest of the field, the track is going to be completely different, it looks like, if they're indeed going to follow through with this current plan that they have for next year. Further up the order, Chase Briscoe very quietly got a 15th spot. Bubba Wallace in 14th was flirting with the top 10 earlier in the event, but another decent run for him to go with his top 5 at Pocono. Briscoe continuing the momentum that he had from the 6th place at Road America. Kevin Harvick in 11th, that was about as good as he had run all day. It seemed like they were fighting every kind of struggle out there, which is very surprising given Harvick's pedigree at Atlanta. He's kind of had a renaissance at that track in the last few years since they switched to Ford at Stuart Haas's team. but just no sign of that at all in today's race here, even with the shorter distance. Brad Keselowski in 10th spot, already talking about needing to win New Hampshire to firm up a spot in the playoffs here. Again, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, he's already got a foothold here in the rankings already, but given how well he had run in New Hampshire last year, he's certainly going to be one to watch one way or the other. It seems like, again, he would run even better than that in today's race here. But again, I think it's just a crowded top end of the field. Chase Elliott finishing in the 7th spot. Good bounce back from the engine failure he had in the spring race here. Although he did win Road America last week, not as much of a factor perhaps in the overall performance. Tyler Reddick having a good run. I thought he was going to be right up there along with Larson. I was very surprised neither of them were as much factors for the lead. Reddick in particular seemed to have a great run at Road America, in spite of that being a track that I really wouldn't expect him to be that good on. But then coming around into this one here, where you're able to run the high line like he does at Homestead, did very well though. I mean, again, 6 spots, still nothing to sneeze at there, and certainly helps him on his end of the point standings. Now that Kurt is going to be leapfrogging the drivers without wins and joining the group that has, that's going to be interesting on that end. Bowman very quietly with the top 5. Truex much the same, although he had to rally through the field a couple times. And that's a lot to certainly look at from there. Really further back, well, we had the other issue with the track coming up at the same time, so certainly issues with that. Very reminiscent, as they mentioned, of Martinsville in 2004 with Jeff Gordon, or Dover most recently. I think it was last year or the year before. They had some surface coming up off of turn 2. Does happen from time to time. Kudos to NASCAR for doing that relatively quickly, less than 20 minutes to actually make the repairs. Big improvement from the way things were back in 2004 on the short track. But again, the demands and I guess the amount of damage that was done, very different. But of course, that leads us into our discussion about the track next year. As I tweeted in the initial response, I wasn't sure exactly how to put it even into words. Thankfully, the GIFs currently available on Twitter allow to speak the 1,000 words that you could fit into 280 characters. And that was certainly my reaction to it there. Not as pointed as people like Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick and others have in their statements, although I certainly agree with their questioning of what NASCAR's ultimate motivation is and these track promoters in general. Certainly we've had questions over widening the track surface and trying to increase the amount of space that drivers can race and try to create as many grooves as possible. There's obviously been strategies that have been different in that sense, where Bristol, of course, has changed back and forth since their resurfacing in 2007. People trying to find, I guess, is about as close as they can to what Homestead hit upon when they had that gradient banking added in 2003. Some tracks have succeeded with that, others haven't. Other tracks, for some reason, seem to be taking the kind of the Kentucky angle, like Texas did, where they actually reduced the banking and widened the track out. And things are kind of just very bizarre in that sense. It has a distinct form of racing there, but also opened the situation with PJ1. And yeah, now, as Kyle Busch said in his statement, really wondering where we're going in terms of narrowing track surfaces. I have to admit, when I first saw the graphic that the Atlanta Motor Speedway put forward, I thought the top surface was what they were going for, that they were going to like increase the banking and really widen it back out. I didn't realize that the suggestion they had was actually beneath. Actually, if they didn't have the right labels on there, you could almost probably be excused to think that they're going to kind of build up some other infrastructure underneath the existing banking or something like that and just improve drainage. And although that was one aspect of it from what they showed, I'm not sure even visually how that's supposed to work in the corners with increased banking that's cut off so much that you don't have that bottom groove and do 2-groove racing around there. I think it's almost kind of like what they did with Phoenix, because you have a situation there where you have a track that's configured a certain way that seems to work pretty well for what it does, but the surface is worn out, so you got to repave it. Phoenix has always had that struggle where to the point now where obviously they've renumbered the corners and moved the starting line around. And some of that from, the direction of the sun I could see, because, the old grandstands, you'd be basically staring right into the sun. It's kind of like turn 9 at Sears Point that way. But in terms of the actual increased banking and creating kind of this freak show of different angles and corners and people having to kind of challenge each other to go into the new turn 2 before people kind of narrow down. That seems to be the kind of the trend that they're going with this Atlanta reconfiguration. I'd love to see a better depiction of what it's going to look like overall. Just that one segment there, it just doesn't look really very workable. It almost looks like, you almost have, I don't know, the angle was just kind of bizarre. And even I noticed the last time I looked at it too, it seemed like the angle of the apron was kind of tapered off a little bit. And I don't know if they were kind of going for, I mean, the way Kyle Busch mentioned it with Darlington, if the intention was to create it almost seems like you would go back to the way the Darlington used to be, where the outside lane was kind of the breakdown lane and the racing groove was kind of this wider, lower part of the track there. But obviously nowadays you go to Darlington, you have all this empty space and you're running this narrow groove up there with the cars being as fast as they are. It's just so hard to visualize, but it's confusing though. And looking at it the way they rendered it, I'm not entirely confident about it either. The language that I'm hearing about them trying to make it more like a super speedway, I don't see how that's going to work at all. I think, especially on a 1.5 mile track, if the track's going to be that short. Now, Atlanta, back in 1997, when they reconfigured it the first time, they had absolutely, literally dizzying speeds. That's why Jeff Bodine's qualifying record from when he won the pole in the first fall Atlanta race there of this current configuration is still the track record. It had that much speed. I believe, if I remember correctly, I think NASCAR Man did an article on this as well. Tim Steele, who was a very big ARCA driver that was very consistent top prospect getting into the Cup Series in the late 90s, he had a very serious accident there at Atlanta soon after that reconfiguration and pretty much kind of curtailed his career. This is something I'm sure that, was on Kyle's mind, it seemed like, when he was referencing his own accident that he had at Daytona in the Xfinity Series a couple of years ago. If it's going to be, you're already going to have really quick speeds, even if they kept everything the same in terms of the current configuration. It's going to be right back to 1997. And of course, today, the cars are potentially much faster. Obviously, when they do the 550 package, they're not. But if they ran the full-on package, and who knows what it's going to be like with the next gen car, that's a complete toss-up on that end. It's going to be, really challenging with the speeds there too. So I think there was already going to be some concerns about how fast this track was going to be, even if they kept everything the same. And now they're throwing in this other ringer here where they're going to increase the banking and narrow the groove. And yeah, I think the drivers are right to even question what the ultimate strategy is. And I'm not going to profess to know that either. Hopefully we get closer to an answer. I don't know if we're going to get a statement from the folks at Atlanta or NASCAR or SMI or anybody on that angle. But it seems like this has to be addressed, because if there's just going to be some kind of separation between the two, that's just not really going to work out very well for anybody. They need to make sure, especially if they're just going to kind of just bring this up at the drop of a hat and then immediately start working on it this week. I know it's their show and it's their track and they can do whatever they want with it. But it's bizarre. I'd like to learn more about how much, if at all, these drivers are being consulted for it. We're hearing from a lot of these drivers that it sounds like they're not. I don't know where these ideas are coming from and where the inspiration is. Certainly the quotes that Tony Stewart had online this past week here. I think there was the interview that he had with Kyle Petty, and Mark Martin was retweeting some of his older statements there. So a lot of that is certainly rung true, especially given the fact that on this same weekend, Stewart's own Superstar Racing Experience had probably their best race so far at the Slinger track, with very basic cars and very basic rules on a extremely tiny track already. And they put on a great show. So kudos again to Marco Andretti for the great show out there, as well as Luke Fenhouse for his tremendous performance in the as the local racer out there. It's too bad we only got one more race in that series, because I think that's been really exciting to watch this year. Our own William Saki, as I mentioned, our ARCA correspondent, the other staff writer here at LastCar, he was actually in attendance at that race this past weekend. And as he has through the series so far, he's done articles on the other races. So certainly look forward to his feature on that later this week. but yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to look at. It's gonna be it's gonna be interesting to kind of see from this standpoint. But yeah, I'm not really excited for this new configuration of Atlanta. I don't see the strategy in play here. I'm not crazy about the gradient banking. I'm relieved to a degree, I guess, that they didn't do the gradient thing on the track surface. But the narrowing of the groove is certainly troubling, and the drivers seem to be pointing out that quite a bit. So we'll see if something more comes to that, but I'm not sure. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Again, maybe they're anticipating something about the next gen car that's going to be more conducive to this. I'd like to believe that, but if that's the case, I'd like to hear that. So, and again, this kind of dovetails into another thing. Now, this past week, it seems, in particular, has had no shortage of controversy or things that are circulating around. And I don't know about you guys, but on my end in particular, I've had to really pick and choose what I'm going to really discuss more at length and what I haven't. Certainly, the one thing that has come up earlier this week was that about the crash testing with the next gen cars, and I'm still not really ready to comment on that as well. I'm not exactly sure what's going on behind the scenes. I don't feel like I have enough information to really comment on that. Certainly, it's I don't know. I'd like to know more. I mean, much like this thing with Atlanta, I'd like to know much more about it. Hopefully more information is going to come about from it there. But yeah, if there's concerns about what they're going to do with these tracks and there's concerns about the next gen car, hopefully those get worked out in the meantime. Yeah, again, I'm not really ready to really kind of bring up much else on that. I think that NASCAR's already had more than enough on their plate here, and hopefully we're going to get some more information on that further down the line there. One thing that I definitely do want to talk about, though, is with the Xfinity Series race yesterday and the bizarre circumstances that led to Daniel Hemrick yet again not winning an Xfinity Series race for the first time in his career. And as those of you that follow my Twitter account at Last Car on Brock saw, I wasn't sure exactly how this was coming across, but at that point, I just didn't care. The fact that the ongoing meme that has always been there and has been discussed by me many times on this show and in several articles on the site of why the Cup Series guys need to be in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series to that extent, why they need to be there, especially in the Xfinity Series. This seems to be primarily an issue over there because, again, that's supposed to be the main step for guys getting into the Cup Series and making names for themselves, especially NASCAR's Names Are Made Here campaign for these last few years. To have this last race where Kyle Busch is making what was purported to be his last Xfinity Series race, and you can believe or not believe that as much as one can. I think that's at best up in the air. You never can say never, much like Kyle himself said in the interview, because I think one reason for that is I think a lot of these teams give a little bit too much power to the sponsors. Yes, you need them to keep the lights on and everything, but I think these teams sometimes forget what power they have in terms of sponsor activation and promoting drivers and teams and everything like that, and that they can actually really have some control over bringing a sponsor in, that they're not entirely beholden to them. Because a lot of times that gets brought up here that they need to get Cup guys in there because sponsors won't sponsor them otherwise. I still don't buy that because I just think there's so little transparency in what goes on over there. And this was another example of that in that case. Kyle Busch shouldn't have been in that race, period. He just shouldn't have been. But he shouldn't have been in a lot of these other Xfinity Series races. He is far and away one of the most knowledgeable drivers of the modern racecraft in the Cup Series. And I think that is a good reason that a lot of his comments on the Atlanta Motor Speedway should be taken into serious consideration. I believe he's so self-aware of a lot of the way these cars handle that one thing that stood out to me was back at Sears Point back in 2019 when he was trying to track down Martin Truex Jr. And he had basically through the entire race figured out that his car just wasn't a match for Truex's and that he was just trying to make it look interesting to the end. The ability of awareness, the amount of awareness that it requires to do that, I don't think that's merely bragging. I think he's actually capable of figuring that out. So the fact that this guy needs to be in the Xfinity Series for any reason at all is just ridiculous to me. And you have this whole ridiculous situation. So when you have all that in the background, and then on top of that, you have this incident where Daniel Hemrick is one of the development drivers for his team. Now, he's been with other teams, of course. He's done with Childress and so forth. And accidental or whatever, I'll give Kyle the benefit of the doubt here because, you just don't know. I mean, the only person knows is the guy behind the wheel. You make contact with a guy and you take him out of the lead. All I could think of was every person that has always said, "Oh, we need Cup guys in the Xfinity Series. Oh, how are you supposed to know if you're ready for Cup unless Kyle Busch comes in and then waxes you by 5 seconds?" It's such a, all I could think is somebody saying that and just bashing their face into a table because it was just absurd. Because it's like, look at this. Is this what you want? Is this what you want? Is this what you think is acceptable? Because I don't think it is. Again, it wouldn't be any more acceptable if it was somebody that was like, a Noah Gragson type or somebody that was over aggressive there. Then yeah, but again, if it were somebody like Gragson or somebody else, then that could be handled, just one-to-one. What is somebody like Daniel Hemrick going to say in a situation where a guy like Kyle Busch takes him out of the lead? And again, accidentally or not, it's nothing really about Kyle himself. It's about the circumstances that put him out there to begin with. That's where it just gets ridiculous. Because again, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? He's going to say something about Kyle Busch in that sense when he's drawing a paycheck from the same team. He's just not, and that's not fair to any of these guys. The Xfinity Series talent pool, as I've said in a lot of these shows here, is I think some of the strongest ones that we've seen in many years. I think they have a great group of drivers in there. And no, they're not all Cup ready, but some of them are. Some of them absolutely are. I would love to see Justin Allgaier get another shot at the Cup Series in a better team. We never got to see really what he was capable of with H. Scott because that team struggled on all corners. Look at how many problems Michael Annett had on that team as well, and how much better he's done in the Xfinity Series. Noah Gragson, yes, I think a lot of his tendencies need to be reeled in a bit, but I think the Xfinity Series is a good place for that. And one of these days, he should be in the Cup Series. Then you, of course, have Austin Cindric, who we've already seen turn heads in a few of these Cup Series starts on the road courses. He could have very easily pulled off an upset at Road America there if the car had stayed under him. There's a lot of talent there that, again, just because they're not ready there yet, well, that's what the Xfinity Series is for. They get better and then get back up into the top series. Now, I know that it's always going to be easy for somebody like me to say that because I'm not one of the drivers out there. And yeah, there's probably a number of drivers out there that do want the Cup Series guys in the field. But the thing I always want to know is which Xfinity drivers are the ones that want the Cup Series guys in there? Do you think Tommy Joe Martins wants those guys out there, or Ryan Vargas, or some of these other guys that are a little bit further back in the pack that are trying to get top tens and struggling for sponsors and getting them in there? I don't want to speak for them, but I would think that they probably aren't as excited about that as maybe somebody that's like the teammate of one of these guys, like Daniel Hemrick is to the Kyle Busch, or somebody else that's a development guy that's within that direct pipeline. They'll probably say that, yeah, it's a great idea to have them up there. But I'm not sure if the rest of the field really feels that same way. So it's just ridiculous. And I think if you just let the Xfinity Series stand alone and be what it is, that would just make a lot more sense. It's really not the same thing. The thing that's always beside me on this is that it's not a complicated concept to really think about. You can tell that this is worlds apart from a Cup Series guy showing up at a local dirt track and just kind of helping that dirt track out, get more people to show up because you have a Cup Series guy there. And yeah, they'll probably dominate out there like Kyle Larson did a lot of last year. But that's one thing. But again, that guy's not going for the track championship. He's not going for, actually competing on a week-to-week basis at that one track. He's going all over the place. He just likes to race, and that's fine. Drivers should be able to race, as many things that they can get their hands on. But again, there should be in NASCAR, there's a clear tiered system between the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series. There's a clear process there of developing talent. And along the way, you have like older veterans that are probably not going to move out of that series or are just committed to it because it fits more the team's budget. So you have like a big team like Thor Sport in the Truck Series, or you have programs like JR Motorsports so far has been in the Xfinity Series, although I think they'll probably get in the Cup eventually. These are programs and teams and drivers that just make the best out of it. And I don't see where a Cup guy, going in there and just stomping everybody out there is going to help it. If you want to get out there and compete with Cup Series guys, that's where you need to get into the Cup Series and be a part-time effort, like Cindric has done with Penske, like Allmendinger has done with Colleague. And, again, they're with teams that actually have, higher incomes that can afford to run Cup Series teams. But if that's the issue, if that's the barrier that's preventing other Xfinity teams from getting Cup Series entries, then that's something that needs to be looked at. And of course, this brings us back to our old buddy, the charter system, which has, done as much as it possibly can to prevent any of that from being seen, to prevent any of these, any of these lower division drivers from running part-time efforts and everything else. And that's just the real unfortunate part of it. And again, I really do think that there's enough of a difference, especially now, between the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series, that racing against, Kyle Busch in an Xfinity Series car probably isn't as instructive to like doing better out there as it is racing against Kyle Larson in a dirt track series race. It's just not the same thing. If you want to compete against the guy in the Cup Series, if your ultimate goal is the Cup Series, then you should have opportunities to run in Cup. A lot of the talent that we had in the supposed golden age of the sport was brought about because there were guys in the Xfinity Series that could make a few starts in Cup, and they would run for teams like Junie Donlavey. They would run for teams like TriStar Motorsports, like smaller organizations out there that maybe didn't have the full sponsorship and maybe didn't qualify for all the races, but you would try these different guys out. And if one of them had staying power, then they would just naturally get into the Cup Series. And it was great because the Cup Series was a part of that process. Some of them didn't even run the Xfinity Series. Some of them came from any place else. Some of them did, and of course, just like now as then, we've had drivers that have come up from the Xfinity Series into the Cup Series back then that ultimately didn't have a lot of success in the Cup Series. You look at guys like David Green. You look at, other competitors. Mike McLaughlin, like other competitors that were great, Buckshot Jones. These guys were, winners in the Busch Series and just couldn't quite transfer it over into the Cup Series. Johnny Benson was almost in that same category. But they still had that opportunity, and the Cup Series was allowed to be involved in that process. What you have today is this very clear barrier because of the charters, because of reducing the fields, because of reducing the number of teams, and now next year reducing the number of cars that each team can have with this next gen deal. The Cup Series has never been harder to get into, and it doesn't need to be. It's already hard. It should already be hard to get into just by prestige, not through these additional barriers that are thrown in along the way. And that's where we're kind of ending up at this point. I'm getting a lot of all this hot take thing. It's like, oh, this is a bad take. This is a bad take. I'm tired of hearing about it. Well, I'll tell you right here, folks, I'm digging my heels in. Because if you don't think that what happened on Saturday was yet another indication of how absurd this all is, then I don't know what race you guys were watching, because that's what I was seeing. It's terrible. It's terrible. And again, if it was a situation, if this played out where it was a couple of Xfinity Series guys and one of the other regulars took Daniel Hemrick out of the lead, it would feel entirely different than if it's Kyle Busch, who shouldn't be in the race to begin with, and it gets in that situation. And that's where, again, it leaves out whether it was intentional or not, whether it was not. I'm sure it was an accident. I'm sure he was trying to push him to get to the front, and that is what it is. But again, it just calls more attention to the issue that he shouldn't have been there to begin with. Just like Kevin Harvick shouldn't have been there when Ross Chastain was trying to win at Darlington back in 2018. We've seen too many examples of this, and people can argue about whatever statistics they want to point at and the quality of the field. But I do think that now that we have scaled it back, that Kyle Busch is the unusual aspect of the Xfinity Series, that he's one of the few guys that actually does run in the Xfinity Series. We've seen an improvement in the Xfinity Series field. And, drivers like Chase Briscoe may still be getting their feet under him. Christopher Bell in the same category. Tyler Reddick, again, just talking about him today. Where do you think these guys came from? Do you think they would have had a great ride if you still had 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe even a dozen Cup Series guys in the field, even just for the big events. Maybe not every week, but even just for those. Do you think that these guys would have Cup Series rides now or be in positions for them? I don't think they would. And I don't get why some people just don't see this. Because again, I always think that the biggest thing is you have to have a lot of teams out there. You have to have a lot of as many Cup teams as possible to have as many seats open as possible to get as many of these drivers in there. And you need to have a reliable ladder system to see if drivers are ready to go. If you're a guy like Chase Briscoe and you dominate the Xfinity Series last year, he may not have won the championship, but I think people could very, very fair to say that he was one of the best, if not the best driver last season. Austin Cindric should absolutely get just as much credit for finishing it off and winning on the ovals when he was just a road course driver. Both those guys, they deserve to be in the Cup Series, but you only know that because they won these races. And fans, just like sponsors, they're not going to look at it the same way if they say, oh, well, this guy's the best guy in the Xfinity Series, but he finishes 6th every week. Why is that? Well, it's because there's 5 Cup guys in every field. Nobody cares about that. They want to look at these guys winning all these races and being a factor in those events. And I'm thankful that, that we're moving past this and not having as many Cup guys in the field because now we're actually able to see them win. Winning helps more than anything in terms of, getting your getting your confidence as an athlete. You lose obviously more times than you win, no matter what sport you're in. But if you never win, or if it's stacked against you in such a way that you're not expected to win, that's a whole different situation. And it's unfortunate when that happens. I think back to when I was in rowing in college, I didn't need some Olympic team to come back from Athens and, row against us and lose to them like every time we had a competition to know that, oh, I need to be fast like them. It's like, well, yeah, no kidding. Like I know that in our little collegiate section here as a collegiate athlete, we row against other people that are from other colleges and there's a semblance of fairness. There's going to be faster teams and there's slower teams within it, but at least we're on equal ground in terms of age and experience and so forth. There's actually some discussion. I actually had a meetup with some of my old rowing teammates just recently. Actually, it was after the Martinsville race a while back, and there was some discussion about some controversy within the sport where they bring in international competitors to compete in collegiate rowing competitions. Now, obviously, you have people from other countries that go always study in the United States and things like that. And there's some things that maybe need to be worked out on that end. It's not like it's unforeseeable. You have people from other countries studying in the United States, but there's a controversy over that. And I couldn't help but remember how similar that sounds. Maybe people would have different experiences or maybe, different exposure to the sport that's not the same over here. And I'll tell you, man, I mean, I've finished last in plenty of competitions when I was in there, but when I was in any of the competitions that I was in, working with my teammates on that, I always felt that I was, we were grouped in the right group and that if things worked out the right way, we would have a chance to win because we were against equal groups in terms of time and equal groups in terms of experience. And, and that was really the thing. And it's not a hard concept to kind of get your hand around. And you don't have to have a lot of athletic experience to understand that either. So I've heard a lot of persuasive arguments on that side of it. I'm hearing much more of it this weekend with what happened on Saturday. But again, my stance is unchanged, completely unchanged. And I, again, never say never. Maybe I'll hear a persuasive argument that'll help that along here. But again, I'm relieved that Kyle Busch is done with Xfinity Series racing, at least for this year. We'll see about next year. I'll believe it when I see it here on this end. But I do think that if Kyle Busch stays out of the Xfinity Series for any extended period of time, it's only going to help the Xfinity Series teams. And it should be expected that guys struggle when they get into the Cup Series. They're going to struggle getting into Cup, even if they're one of these road course ringers like we saw at Road America last week. You saw Kyle Tilley, running off course there in the 78. That doesn't mean he's a bad driver. The guy is he's just not experienced in these particular cars. There's a learning curve that all these other guys have to face. And if you're in the Xfinity Series, you're going to be in an even better position because at least you're going to be running similar cars at these same tracks. So again, I don't want to belabor it too much more because we have entirely too much to talk about on the show tonight. We haven't even really got into much more from the Xfinity Series race. But yeah, I definitely want to hit that head on that angle there. Let's see. So, oh goodness, let me. My goodness, thank you for the super chats here. By the way, I mean, let me catch up on these here at the same time. Alex Viveros, Knoxville was very frustrating. The dirt guys were upsetting to watch, and seeing normal guys not use their brain. Stage racing made those issues happen. NASCAR needs to stop making every race have a classic finish with it. Yeah, again, and we'll certainly talk about this. I guess we could jump into that. Maybe we'll do this along the way to kind of make it dovetail with the debates. Certainly a lot of the frustration from this weekend, if it wasn't already from the situation with Kyle Busch on Saturday in Atlanta, was of what happened over at Knoxville that night. Now, I have to say, I think I mentioned this a while back. I'm very surprised in all the discussion of Knoxville, and this wasn't really touched on really in the lead up to it, that it didn't feel like an invasion to have the NASCAR Truck Series in there. I think I've mentioned that once before. I'm not the most knowledgeable dirt person, like in terms of dirt track racing, who the big names are. I like Steve Kinsler when I grew up. I was familiar with him from when he got in the Cup Series in '95 and when he later did the IROC Series. But I was surprised that there wasn't a lot of outrage of the Truck Series suddenly just dropping into Knoxville for this. I figured that was kind of sacred ground for sprint car guys, that the Knoxville Nationals has this absolute supreme role in it. I know it by reputation, if not from firsthand experience there. Especially in a year where we no longer have the Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis after all the debate that there's been about whether NASCAR should be there, dating back to even its first running back in 1994. I'm very surprised that even leading up to this, there wasn't a lot of concerns about that because, again, the suddenness of shifting it over to Knoxville after, basically pulling a date from Eldora and whether or not that had a role with SRX and Tony Stewart and all that. Again, I don't know anything from that. It seems just be conjecture at this point. But I'm surprised there wasn't more uproar about that. And it did seem almost like going into this race, there wasn't as much hype about it coming into it as there had been for Eldora in the past. I thought Eldora put on a fantastic show for the Truck Series here in general. And one thing I thought was kind of disappointing from the race, at least in the early laps of it there, was that extra burn that separates the groove from the fence. That at Eldora, you could run literally from the inside wall clear up to the fence. And I thought that was fantastic for the Truck Series guys because they could really fan out and run any number of grooves. Some fantastic pictures were always caught during that event. I hope that something gets reconciled, they can come back there. We didn't really see that from this event. And for most of the race itself, I thought it was a very orderly event. It seemed like people were actually not able to really exploit the high groove. Stuart Friesen was trying to at one point, but everybody was kind of fenced into a really, really narrow groove around there. It didn't make it very competitive, at least at the beginning. Now, it sounds strange in hindsight because, of course, what happened in the last stage. And then, of course, you have your last place situation there. Morgan Alexander eliminated after the accident with Jessica Friesen. Fairly open and shut on that one. Glad we were able to at least talk about one of the dirt competitors in that race there, but unfortunate that had to be under those circumstances. But yeah, once we got to the last few laps, suddenly, the lid just popped off here, and drivers like Sheldon Creed were very outspoken about the frustrations and the lack of discipline that some drivers were having out there. I think part of that, I wonder how much of that was that restriction, that it seemed like the preferred groove was so narrow at that track, and that people couldn't really work different grooves there. But whatever the reason was, I mean, you actually had people just bowling each other over there. And certainly the huge pileup that happened towards the end of the event there. We had 14 cautions by the end of the race there. It was unfortunate to see. It certainly turned into a much messier race than Eldora has traditionally been. I mean, certainly it's had pileups before. I think even in 2019, Austin Hill was collected in one of those there. But usually they had such low attrition that you would have. There was one year that Norm Benning finished last, but he was actually like top 5, top 10, or pretty close to it before an accident dropped into the back of the field. So it usually had been pretty clean in that sense. But, it was just kind of a strange race. I wasn't exactly sure what I was expecting. I figured it would be crazy to some point there. But, I mean, if they were drawing comparisons to running the Iowa Speedway there and how competitive the Truck Series has been there, which they have, Iowa has put on some great shows for both the trucks and the Xfinity Series. I think the standalone weekend they used to have in May or June was one of the best markets on the schedule, and they usually would attract a lot of small teams, especially in the Truck Series, that you wouldn't see. I think Lou Goss, who our William Saki interviewed last year, made his debut out there. So that was, or attempted to that one time. But Tommy Regan and other competitors there, it was unfortunate that turned out to be as much of a mess as it was there with all the wrecks that happened at the end. It seemed like everybody was just absolutely dive bombing turns 1 and 2 towards the end, no matter what they could do one way or the other. Not entirely unforeseen that we've seen a big accident. Obviously, the one at Darlington started about the same way, with the front row getting taken out and just nowhere for everybody to go into the first corner. And when something small happens at the front of the field, it's going to be big pretty quick. It's I don't know. I'm not sure if that's going to be a permanent solution. But again, my concern wasn't so much with the racing itself. Because again, I felt like it was unusually clean, at least for most of it, until the very end of it. That maybe drivers are just lying in wait, and then suddenly things just went absolutely nuts, and things got out of control pretty quickly. But I don't know if it's a permanent solution for Eldora. I think Eldora was just a much better venue, and again, much like the Bristol dirt track, I think it kind of had some of those same problems there too. It just didn't seem it just wasn't very well suited for them. And whether or not the trucks are ever going to be well suited for dirt, I think that's up for debate. But I think even from the outset, when you think back to Norm Benning's battle with Clay Greenfield for the last transfer spot in the inaugural race, I thought they put on a great show right from the start. I just hope something gets worked out on that end, because I don't know if Knoxville is the permanent solution. It did again, and again, even though I'm not that knowledgeable with the Truck Series, I think that was kind of the thing that bothered me more. It just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right for the Truck Series to be there. And in point of fact, I got to say also, I think another thing that makes me feel that way is the fact that Fox didn't even bother to bring out their play-by-play crew to the track itself. Much like, that this was treated almost like Canada was, where they don't have guys in the booth. They're just in the Charlotte studio. So they're just reacting to stuff they see on the screens. I thought that really lacked in the presentation of it as well. I thought it was night and day from the SRX broadcast for the Slinger race in particular, in terms of an awareness of the track's history and kind of respecting that and showing that this is just showing some reverence to that a little bit. I mean, there was a little bit of lip service paid to the Sprint Car Hall of Fame there at the track, but I mean, very little of that. So I don't know. It was kind of a mess. I think it would have been a better show if they did a race over at Iowa. But I think, quite frankly, I would love to see Eldora come back. And whether the politics just created a situation where it's like the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, that we're just not going to see competitors out there because of reasons that just have nothing to do with the racing itself, that would be unfortunate, because I thought that they did a very good job. So, yeah, and it was, and as you mentioned, Alex, with not seeing the actual dirt experts, like, getting a good performance out there, I think that kind of really spoke to it too. It would have been nice to see Donnie Schatz be more of a factor in it, or what was it, Blackjack Brian Brown and all that in the factor there. I think that really spoke to, again, either I don't think it certainly wasn't on those drivers for not being experienced enough. I mean, my goodness, they were able to sling. I mean, you got a 10-time champion and Donnie Schatz out there. I mean, they're going to know how to, get around that track and just, wheelbarrow if they get handed one at one point instead. But yeah, it's too bad it was just kind of a mess there. I'm not sure if you could really blame it on particular drivers, although Derek Kraus got a lot of blame for what happened during that. So in fact, he was run over by two different drivers at the end of it there. really spoke to that. But it just shows. I think the biggest thing to take from the Knoxville experiment, if it does turn out to be a one and only, is that not all dirt tracks are made equal. They're just not. You have some that kick up more dust. You have some that are just, that just handle differently, banking and composition and all that. There's so much that's going on. Again, they're doing the Bristol dirt track again next year. I'm still not entirely sold on that. I do give kudos to the track staff for working through an absolutely impossible weekend with the monsoons washing through there. It actually came up during the over at the NMPA that they were actually one of the people nominated for the Pocono Spirit Award for going above and beyond the Call of Duty during that weekend. They got my vote. Unfortunately, not unfortunately. It's unfortunate for them they didn't win the award, but Marcus Lemonis for his role with Camping World sponsoring underfunded drivers, I'm certainly behind that as well. So it's kudos to whoever that went to, but it's unfortunate how that all shook out. But I hope that maybe something happens where there could be a reconciliation with Tony Stewart and Eldora and bring the Truck Series back there, because I think that particular track, for whatever reason, it just kind of was like a throwback to what the Truck Series used to run on back in the early 90s that they ran at Saugus or Tucson, which were, of course, paved tracks back then. They didn't do dirt until Eldora. But it just seemed like it suited that series so much better, to the point that you actually had great storylines that were built into that event, whether it was Norm Benning's last chance qualifier or the Bobby Pierce coming very close to winning there. I was disappointed that Pierce wasn't on that list. I fully expected him to be there to tackle another dirt track out there. He's a figure I thought that was very exciting to see. Whether or not he was just committed to the late Mike Mittler's team there and just doesn't want to race for another program, maybe that's the case. But I would have loved to see more of that there, because I think he's a good talent there too. But it's too bad. It's too bad. Hopefully something gets worked out on that end. But I didn't, again, I did feel a little underwhelmed with that race there. But again, I was pleased with some of the other great runs that they had. Certainly Norm Benningen, the 19th place finish was great. And working his way up there. It's unfortunate that he crunched into Cody Erickson during that big pileup. I think if that hadn't happened, he probably would have been able to get a couple more spots there. But he's got a lot to be, happy with a decent run there. He said he was going to be disappointed if he didn't get a top 5 out of that event. I know that sounds like a real extreme thing, given how off the pace and stuff he's been. He's been in a lot of these truck races and how much he's been struggling with limited financing out there. But again, these are events that these drivers look forward to. And maybe the fact that he struggled in it, even up till that point, also shows that he just wasn't really conducive to it. So it's too bad, but maybe something will get worked out on that end, and that'll be something along the way. Also on the subject, Norm Benning, as I didn't mention this in last week's show, and I definitely wanted to touch on it too. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview I did with Norm on that. I know it's not really a video strictly in that sense. It was just an interview that I had with him there. I put it in video format because I felt that would be the easiest way to distribute it. Probably if I do another one like that, that's just audio only, I'll put it in the caption just to alert people, because I got a couple comments on that had concerned about it. But I didn't want to have a bunch of stuff that was distracting from the interview itself. I felt that Norm, he really wanted to get that story out there as soon as possible while it was still fresh. He had talked to me in Texas about the challenges that he had faced after his truck was stolen in Kansas and being stranded out at the track. Actually, Dave Moody was with me as well on pit road at Texas, and he was kind of telling us both about this story. And Norm reached out to me and said, look, I'd like to get this out there, maybe an article or a video or something like that. And so I was happy to do that. We squeezed that in there, and I got that posted there. So that's where that came about. I don't know if I'll do other interviews like that or other interview videos like that there. But certainly in terms of getting content out a little bit quicker in between the Rise of the Field Fillers episodes, since those have been taking, a lot of time in this sequence here. I'd love to get them out once a month, but that just hasn't been the case so far. That was kind of one thing I wanted to kind of touch on there too. I have another NASCAR man video that I'm going to be working on as well too. I'll probably actually be recording the script for that after this tonight and get that rolling. That'll be another one to look at. Ryan Moore, I saw your comments on here. Thank you for your super chat as well, mentioning the Milwaukee Mile 2007 debacle for Eric Almirola. Absolutely. That's another one there that you got to look at and be like, yeah, what the heck are I mean, again, these sponsor arrangements. And as Rusty said during the broadcast of that, apparently it was a sponsor demand on the team. This issue, I think that's, again, I'm a big fan of trying to take a step back from something and try to find out what the overarching issue is from this. Like, okay, maybe you have, if at its tightest focus, you have Kyle Busch in a Busch Series race or Xfinity Series race, bumping Daniel Hemrick out of a win. But what, even further back, what are the circumstances that led to this? And I do think a lot of it is sponsorship, and I do think a lot of it is the teams feeling like they're not the ones pulling the strings, that they give the sponsors a little bit too much latitude in controlling their day-to-day operations. And, I think the teams need to stand up for themselves and realize that in terms of sponsor activation and everything, that they're the ones that are being consulted for a service. It's not just merely, oh, I'm dumping money into you so you can race. It's a little bit more than that. And that's why last year with the pandemic was such a serious issue. It ultimately cost Carl Long's team the roofclaim.com sponsorship, as you heard from the Rise of the Field Fillers thing, because nobody was seeing the car and the sponsor couldn't welcome fans to the track and do their whole thing and say, look, here's a car that we sponsor and it's this, and this is our company, this is what we do, and all that. That aspect of it is only possible because the race teams exist and that they have the access to the tracks that they have. And I think sometimes even these big teams forget that. So whether it's Joe Gibbs Racing or Kyle Busch Motorsports or Joe Gibbs, even in that sense, Ryan, with the Eric Almirola situation, I think they do forget that. And that's something that needs to be looked at more critically. Again, I think a lot of the problems that people look at with NASCAR these days is just a matter of looking in the wrong spot. And that on the surface, it seems like a whole lot's being done because this is being thrown at this and this is being thrown at that. But the other overarching problem hasn't been fixed. So no matter what they change, you have the same problems. I think when it comes to all the series, that's where the TV broadcasts come in because they need a major overhaul, certainly on the Fox side. And they need some pretty decent tweaks on the NBC side too. NBC is a lot closer to where they need to be than Fox is. But I think there are some overarching principles that need to kind of be worked with on that. And I might do a video on that further down the line, but I got to find space for it with other stuff I'm working on here at the moment. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from on that side of it there too. Alex Viveros, thank you for your other super chat on here. If it runs 60 plus races Cup, you don't need to be in the lower series. No other sports has this issue. If Cup regular want more track time, let them rent the track out for a day. There you go. Perfect option. That's a very good point there, Alex. Yeah, these other Cup teams, that's the other thing that also just really gets at me. It's like that they almost want like empathy for saying like, oh, we need more track time. It's unreasonable for you to expect us to go out there and run on this track that we've never run on before. It's like, well, everybody in the field can say that. What makes the top of the series special in that sense? If anything, a guy that's a multi-series champion or multi-time race winner, or as you said, 60 plus starts, they shouldn't have any real claim to that. If anything, get the lower end guys out there to run the Xfinity Series. Get Timmy Hill, get BJ McLeod, get those guys, which they do. And again, it's very clearly that's not the same thing because they're out there just trying to improve their programs. And I think a lot of people don't have that problem with it. And of course, they're running further back in the lineup, so the big teams aren't going to have a concern with it. But yeah, if you're a big team out there, it's just you get the most out of the Cup Series. And I really do think Kyle Busch would have a ton more Cup Series wins if he just wasn't meddling around the Xfinity Series. I think we'd be talking about him in the same company as Jimmy Johnson now, and maybe not a few years from now in that sense. And yeah, he's closing the gap. He's racking up wins here and there. But at the same time, I think he would be much more dominant in the Cup Series, and his accomplishments in the series would be respected a lot more if that were the case. But as it stands, he's got as many wins as he has, and just the one championship, or I guess the two championships now at this point. Who knows how much more he could have done if he wasn't focusing on the Xfinity Series side. And the difference in the Xfinity Series has grown so large at this point, and is now going to be even larger next year with the next gen car being just a whole other thing. You just can't drive them the same. As I mentioned with Joe Nemechek in 2019, he said if you drew, when you went between the Xfinity Series car for Mike Harmon's team and the Cup Series car that was entered for, I think it was Premium Motorsports at the time, He said that if he drove the Xfinity car the way he drove the Cup car, he would drive the car straight through the fence, because the Cup car with the 550 package, you had to keep the thing just matted all the way around the track and just hope for the best. The Xfinity car, you actually had to brake. You actually had to slide in the corner. You actually had to worry about braking zones and all that other stuff there. So, again, with that clear difference in mind, how much is actually gained from running against Kyle Busch in those cars when you're going to be running completely different cars in there? You may as well be learning from Chuck Yeager how to fly a jet fighter by, driving, by following him in traffic. Makes about as much sense. So it's absurd, so I just don't understand it. But that's just kind of, that's the way it gets put forward. And it's these, I think in NASCAR, you should always be very suspicious of these memes that come up, or when people just say things just casually, that on the surface makes sense. But if you really start thinking about it, it's like, well, does that really make sense? Like, it's like, oh yeah, well, they're not gonna be ready for Cup unless they run against Cup guys in the Xfinity Series. I hear countless people say that, but every time I hear that, I'm like, well, do they really? Like, why is that? Why do they need that? And how does it actually help? And who's saying that it helps? And who's not saying that it helps? Who's stayed out of the debate? I think it's worth to have. I'm not saying you have to question everything, but I think a lot of things you got to kind of look at a little bit more, because unfortunately, maybe that kind of leads to situations like we have this weekend, where we seem to just have this confluence of just controversies and people upset about this and that and whatever else. So I don't know. But thank you for the super chat there, Alex. Let's see here. Okay, let me get down here too. Ryan Moore, thank you for your super chat there as well. Hey, Brock, what was your favorite moment from the current Atlanta configuration? Favorite moment in general? I mean, there's so many good moments for the Atlanta track. It's had so many great moments. I think it's probably not that surprising for most of you out there if I said that my favorite moment would have to be Jerry Nadeau's first career victory at 2000 on that same old surface on Monday there at the very end of the season in ESPN's last race. I think that, for me, that's very hard to beat. Right up there would have to be all of those moves. We always call it the F move off of the turn 4 there, where somebody kind of pulls that slingshot there, like Jimmy Johnson and Carl Edwards. Carl Edwards did on Jimmy Johnson in 05, or the Kevin Harvick versus Jeff Gordon thing in 2001, or Bobby Labonte and Dale Earnhardt in 2000. Well, I guess Earnhardt. Well, was Earnhardt on the inside in that one? I guess maybe he's the outside. But yeah, that move, that outside lane, creating those great photo finishes. And we haven't seen one in a little while, at least not in the Cup Series. But we'd seen some good races in that time. Certainly all three of those certainly come to mind. I mean, the Kevin Harvick one was just, for those of you who may be a bit newer to the sport, I mean, that was just mammoth. I think the expectations were nil for Harvick coming into that race. And he had a decent run at Rockingham in his first Cup start, even at a track that later in his career he didn't really do that well on. He only had a couple of more years to really tackle it, at least on the Cup Series side. That Atlanta win was just a lightning bolt out of thin air. So that was a whole different situation on that end there. And when he won it in that way, with that mirror image of the 2000 finish, it was something. That was, I mean, it's incredible watching it. And I know it's overplayed, but it's a moment that, it doesn't get old. And it's right there with, Junior's thing at the 2001 July race later that year. I think it's almost actually more, it was actually almost more emotional in that one, because he actually had, the crew there and everything, and them just, it was almost like divine intervention, which is, I think that in sports, those are the kind of stories that, really kind of make you take a step back and just kind of internalize it. So that would be up there. And that was one where Jerry was very much a factor. They had to take the lead from him to let all that happen. Him and Dale Jarrett and Jeff Gordon and Kevin Harvick were absolutely putting on a show and showing how many grooves of racing you have. And it's sad to know that most likely is going to be just completely lost. That was a great surface that they had. It had controversy from the start. Again, as I mentioned earlier in this, with the Tim Steele accident. I hope I didn't say Dave Steele earlier. I meant Tim Steele. The Tim Steele's accident and the other speed differences they had back in '97, and all the great races that have happened since then. Bobby Labonte's rise through the ranks and propelled on being so good at the quad ovals, especially that one. So many great memories along the way. It's hard to pick one, but certainly the Jerry Nadeau one, I think would still be top of the list. Yeah, the Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski. I wouldn't say that would be a favorite moment. That was just terrifying. I know when they first showed Brad's car after it hit that wall, it just didn't look good. Thank God. I mean, I think it landed on the passenger side. If it hadn't, I think that would have been a different story. But that was, again, the Edwards Keselowski controversy is one that you just don't really. You don't really hear as much about versus like the Jimmy Spencer and Kurt Busch rivalry, or Bobby Allison and Richard Petty, or any other one before, after, or since. But yeah, that was a tense time, especially when both of them were in the Busch Series, and and then Brad just kind of getting a foothold in the Cup Series that time. That was a tense battle, to the point where Bob Keselowski had to kind of take a step in on that. So there was that. Think how Stanley Gibbs doesn't have a car for John. Yeah. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm seeing some good debate here in the chat here. I appreciate the discussion on that. Because there's a lot of different directions with again, I'm seeing, again, there's a lot of things, especially with the Xfinity regulars versus the Cup Series regulars. If you have a lot of teams from the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series, that certainly plays a role too. Versus having organizations that start up organically in the Xfinity Series, like Colleague Racing, for example, or JR Motorsports, even for that extent, and then having them grow up through the ranks. Obviously, yeah, if you have a Stewart Haas entry, or you have an entry from Penske or anything like that, yeah, they're going to be head and shoulders above everybody. The problem is, I think it'd be really tricky to police that, because you still have situations where big teams bring in their cars in lower series. If you think that Kevin Harvick's runs for BJ McLeod's effort were in BJ McLeod cars, I think that's pretty doubtful that they were bringing in actual Fords from Stewart Haas Racing for him to run, that those were other Riley Herbst cars that he was running. It's not the same situation. It would be great if he did. I think it would be an awesome test to see a Cup Series guy jump into a team with their cars that they're lower funded efforts in that sense. But that's just not the case. And we saw that even at Circuit of the Americas too, and the improved performance that you saw from some of these other organizations. But yeah, that would be another one to look at. It would be tricky to police, but I agree that it is part of the issue. I mean, you're going to keep Cup guys out of Xfinity, Cup teams out of Xfinity. I mean, I think that would be harder to do. I also think that those teams have a vested interest in developing talent. Look how much of a name like guys like Ty Gibbs have suddenly become this year, or Josh Berry, even though that's with JR Motorsports predominantly. Although now seems to just be just about everywhere now. Everywhere you look now, between Jordan Anderson's team and Rackley War and all these other guys, it's you still need somebody to develop the talent, and it comes down to the money, and they can work something out with that. And I saw the comment on here, that if you don't have Kyle Busch in the 54 car, then you're just not going to have the money to have John Hunter Nemechek be in the Truck Series. I take your point on that, and that's another popular statement that I hear on this subject. But I think it's encouraging to look at that and say, okay, well, why is that? Why do the teams put themselves in a situation where they have to have a Cup Series guy out there in order to, sponsor these other things? Is it just to the point where the company is putting so much money into the Cup Series guy that it can't all go to the Cup Series team, that they got to spend it elsewhere in the Xfinity Series? Is it such a situation where, companies like, okay, well, we'll sponsor John Hunter Nemechek for 2 races if we also get to sponsor, Kyle Busch for 5 races? Why doesn't the team come in? Where's the team in this equation saying, well, no, we're not going to do that. You sponsor him, haggle it the other direction and say, okay, maybe you sponsor Kyle Busch for 1 race and you sponsor John Hunter for 4 races. How about that? Where does that come into the equation? Where is the team in this to say, no, you can't do that? And again, I know it sounds silly to say, oh, they're going to be turning away money. They need sponsors. They need these companies to come in and jump on board for it. Well, I mean, again, it's, they got, what are they trying to accomplish at the end of the day? I still call Kyle Busch and these other drivers start and win drivers. And if people are going to be upset about start and park drivers, they should be upset about any other drivers in the field where it's already like a guarantee how it's going to turn out. And it's absurd. And again, and it's worlds apart from like Dick Trickle showing up to, short tracks and stuff in the Midwest. And that's a whole other league. And it's not viewed as like a tier system to get into a higher, level of anything. For those guys, that is the top series. And those are the best of the best out there. Where does that make sense in the Xfinity series? And yeah, and again, if it's a situation where Kyle Busch, can't afford to put a Truck Series team out there, well, I mean, again, they have to evaluate that differently. It can't be allowed to be an option. I think that's the biggest thing. It can't be allowed to be an option. It just can't. And sponsors don't understand this. Sponsors don't understand the nuances of the sport. All they want are just eyes on their logo. All they want are just the best chance to get their logo seen. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's their business model. That's what they need to do. But guess what? What the team needs to say is like, look, this is Kyle Busch. He runs in the Cup Series. If you want to sponsor Kyle Busch, you jump on board for a Cup Series race, and we'll see if we have any openings for you, and we'll get that working. Now, we also have this Xfinity Series program, and this is another guy that maybe Kyle Busch has worked with, or this is a guy that Kyle Busch said so-and-so about, and he's available, and this is a top team because, we run Kyle Busch, so the cars that we have in this series are going to be really tough. Then you need, and if you want to get your car seen, and we don't have any openings with Kyle Busch in the Cup Series, then you should sponsor this guy. Why aren't the teams doing that? And if they are doing that, then why aren't they doing it? Why aren't they doing it enough to make it work? Because, like, again, if they are doing that, and I guess the elephant in the room is we're talking about this with Joe Gibbs Racing because Kyle Busch is just about the only guy that's bushwhacking anymore. There's still some examples beyond that. Why isn't Joe Gibbs doing that? Why are there races that Ty Gibbs doesn't have any sponsorship at all? That's absurd. The kid's won a couple races now already. What's going on that end? That shouldn't be acceptable. And again, and I know that we're just looking at it from this season, and maybe it was just a contract for the entire year that they had Kyle Busch set up to run these 5 races, and of course that was the case. But why couldn't they move things around a bit? Why couldn't they say like, okay, well, hang on, maybe if you just kind of chip in just a little bit more, you can sponsor Ty Gibbs, who's probably going to be having a good shot at winning any number of these races. It shouldn't be possible that he doesn't have a sponsor given how successful he's been. So again, it's not just a matter of not having sponsors be available, that it's a finite number and it's not going to go beyond that. It's a matter of apportioning resources and putting it in one direction or another. And that's the team's decision, subject to rules under NASCAR. If NASCAR wants to come up with some kind of rule that restricts like how many times a Busch Series guy, Cup Series guy can be in the Busch Series, that's one thing. But the ability to say, okay, we have X number of sponsors that put out for this much money. We need this much money to run this team. We need this much to run this team. We don't have any more openings over here. We have openings here. That's all the team. The team needs to take responsibility for that. And when they're not doing that properly, then the team needs to really reevaluate that. And what now again, should NASCAR step in and say, oh, well, you need to do this and you need to do that? No, they shouldn't. I think at the end of the day, it's a private business. They operate really, under, to run races in NASCAR. They're a race team in that sense. But at the same time, they should just, look at this differently. They should just look at it differently. I just don't buy the reason that, oh man, we're not going to be able to run John Hunter Nemechek if we don't let Kyle Busch run these races. That's absurd. They shouldn't be starting from that standpoint, especially if you're Joe Gibbs Racing, especially if you're a team that's won championships in or been a championship contender in like all these different series and been around for that long. It's kind of the same rationale for the charter system, where if the charters are kind of targeted more towards these are lower ended teams that are probably going to cash out of the sport and they're going to close. Well, what purpose does that have for a higher end team where they're not having issues pulling sponsors and they're nowhere near shutting down at any point? Why do they need them? It's the same rationale. So again, that's kind of my concern on that standpoint. But I understand where you're coming from, and I get that. But again, I think that just points to a difference in philosophy these teams have. Now, if the dollars and cents don't work out, then again, I think that's where they need to kind of look at it differently. They should be encouraged to look at it differently. And we've seen that from some other organizations that haven't relied so heavily on a Cup Series guy running multiple multiple Xfinity Series races. There are other teams that make that work. We haven't seen Brad Keselowski or Joey Logano in the Xfinity Series as much. They usually show up at Watkins Glen all the time. I don't know why. We'll see if they do again this year because we didn't have it last year. But we don't see them all the time. Certainly not compared to a decade ago. Richard Childress, same thing. We don't see. We had to have Austin Dillon come in to relieve for JR Motorsports there with Michael Annett, but that was a whole other situation. We just don't see that as much. Why it does seem to pertain to Gibbs specifically that they can't make this work out there. And again, there's that difference between Gibbs and Kyle Busch Motorsports on the Truck Series side too. And, how much of, is one the other, because of course they both have the Toyota support. That's a whole other issue. And I'm not going to pretend to understand the intricacies of this. I'm just saying this is just what it looks like on surface level and something else to kind of be looked at that way. So, yeah. Let's see. Who would you like to see in top Xfinity equipment, Jack Garland? I mean, yeah, I'd love to see. I guess. Well, actually, that brings up just the same thing that I was kind of almost going into at that same standpoint. BJ McLeod almost drove Michael Annett's car this week. Just, I guess they couldn't fit him in the seat, or they couldn't adjust the car properly, or whatever the situation was. That would have been exciting. Talk about Jimmy Means on his interview with the Dale Jr. Download this week, which was outstanding, by the way. Just imagine if somebody like that, one of these owner-driver types or something like that, get like a one-off attempt in one of these guys, a JR Motorsports car that's, a really good entry or something like that. That would be exciting to see. I think that's kind of the tier I would be looking at. Brandon Brown, I mean, he's done a great job in that 68 car, had a good run going. Unfortunate how things worked out. We haven't really talked about more on that aspect of the Xfinity race, but of course we'll get into that too. But yeah, he'd be a candidate. Ryan Sieg, I was about to say, although I know he's got the Roush backing there with the switch to Ford and everything. They're having all kinds of struggles there. So I hope that things kind of turn around for him on that. It's just been kind of a disastrous year for him. But guys like that, guys kind of in that tier, the ones that are kind of about the 15th to 25th place runners there, somebody getting up there. Santino Ferrucci got a good ride in that. I think he's done an outstanding job with the Sam Hunt team in this top 15 streak that he's had in most of these races. Did he continue that on Saturday? I think he was up there. It seemed like he had a decent run going there. The 26, where was it? Getting the results here. Was it in there? Harrison Burton, Riley Herbst. Oh, no, he was 33rd. Okay, so unfortunately that dropped through there in this round here. But again, some great runs he's usually had in that 26 car. Unfortunate to see that come to an end, but it was kind of a brutal race for a couple of these competitors further back in the lineup. So that would be another one to kind of look at there too. Looking at the Xfinity results that I just touched on here, Ty Dillon, kudos to him for the 5th place run for Our Motorsports. Seems like just about everybody other than Natalie Decker that gets in that 23 car is able to get some good runs. I think the Decker situation, I would kind of grade that on a curve because I think that's more the Josh Realm effort, except for, besides the regular entries that the Chris Sauer team usually runs. It seems like they're closer to kind of the Childress, or Brett Moffitt's entry in terms of performance. I think there's something going on there where it doesn't quite work out with Decker's runs. I'd be interested to know which chassis are run in one versus another. But it's unfortunate that there just haven't been quite as many good runs on that end. Jeremy Clements keeps a top 10 streak going, finishing the 8th spot there. Sieg just outside the top 10 in 12th. Tommy Joe Martin's in 16th. Jade Buford in 17th. Colby Howard getting into the top 20 in the 20th spot there. Ronnie Bassett Jr. had some difficulties there, jumping into DGM Racing's injury in the 27th spot there. And Austin Dillon finishing 11th in his last-minute relief role for Michael Annett. Hope Michael's doing okay. I know it was too bad he couldn't run that truck in the Truck Series race at Knoxville. I thought that was a really cool throwback to his late father. I really enjoyed actually writing the story about that. for the article. I thought it was interesting. I didn't realize he had such a background at the Knoxville track and was in the Hall of Fame, and showing that similar kind of paint job on the entry there. I thought that was really interesting. It's unfortunate he wasn't able to run it there in the Young's Motorsports entry. But kudos to what was it? It was Chris Wyndham, I think, that took over for him on that. I thought he did a solid job on that. Let's see. David Starr, your last place finisher in that. Landon Castle, the JD Motorsports entry, did a great job getting the 4-car back out there at the very end and climbed to the 38th spot. CJ McLaughlin had to get out of the car from heat exhaustion. David Starr, after crashing out in the incident there with Matt Mills, actually climbed back in the 66 and finished the car under power in the 37th spot. So that was good to see. He actually got on the same lap as Carson Ware that wrecked out earlier. It could have conceivably finished on the other end of the bottom 5. So great job by him getting in there at the last second. I thought that was very impressive. But again, yeah, Kyle Busch, your winner over Jeb Burton. Great run by Jeb Burton, got to say. The colleague team has been just so impressive. They seem to have the same situation that Hendrick has in the Cup Series, where pretty much all the drivers they have are contenders from one week to the next. So they got a good group over there. Let's see. Truck Series 1 on here. RD Fox 76. You're hitting on all cylinders right here, man. I just realized what you needed to do to get sponsors to sponsor Xfinity Series regulars again. Get the TV people to actually cover everyone again instead of just the top 5. Well, what an amazing concept. Like a through the field, like a starting grid, like mentioning these actual sponsors instead of saying the 5, the 2. Yeah, that would be great. And I know that the folks over at PRN just love dunking on, or PRN and MRN love dunking on the broadcast and saying, well, if you don't like it, you just listen to us. That shouldn't be necessary. And they do a great job on the radio broadcast, but, just covering up with paint. I don't get that solution. Just have the broadcasters do what they need to do. Have them make it interesting. Have them keep you engaged. Have them bring up facts that are happening. Have them place the race in historical context. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Oh, man. Why wasn't the Atlanta race run at night? That was surprising me. I assumed that it was going to be by running it in July. Very surprised that it wasn't. Used to have some interesting races at night. The last time they ran a second Atlanta race in 2010, Denny Hamlin led 74 laps and dropped out with the blown engine. One of his final last place finishes until Kentucky recently. I think when they had that short field, that was the first time he finished last since then. So that had been a while there. So that was surprising. Let's see. All right. Let me see here. Okay. So we'll do our trivia segment here and everything too. I think let's see. I'm trying to remember other notes on this too. Oh, no tires, just gas. I saw you asked when the next starting grid is. For those of you who are in the Patreon, our next goal, when we reach our next goal, that'll be when the next starting grid will be, next starting grid poll will be introduced. Hopefully we hit it before the end of this year. The sooner we hit that, I think we're at like let's see, it should be the $300 mark on that. I'm going to basically set that at $100 intervals because it seems like we get to those pretty good. We're at 263 right now. So if we get, we get up to the 300 level. So any of you that are interested in that, you want to get some last car swag, even if you're just in there for a month, certainly look into that, because if we reach the $300 mark, we'll have a poll in there where everybody that's on any level in the Patreon can vote on which race I'll do a starting grid for. And I'll do it for either a Cup, Xfinity, or Truck Series race between when we reach that amount and the end of this season. And what I might even do, I might extend that into the first part of next year. I'm already going to do the Daytona 500 next year. I'm probably going to, as much as I can, I'd like to kind of keep that as a regular feature. But if you want to see a grid for any other race, we did the Bristol Dirt race earlier this year, Sears Point a couple years ago. We reached these goals in the past. Those are kind of ones we're looking at. So definitely look ahead to that. So we don't have a date set yet for that. but it's in the near future. We're very close to it, actually. So kudos to those of you, and big thanks to those of you in the Patreon, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock for more details on that. I actually got something I just sent out to my patrons just this last week. So those of you who have your mailing addresses on there, you should be receiving something, a little something in the mail pretty shortly here. Let me see here. Next episode of Rise of the Field Filler is still in the works. Again, don't have too many new updates on that. I'm really thankful that we're actually going to have a couple of off weeks here for the Olympics. I'm going to kind of use that to kind of catch up on a couple of things, including that. I just need to kind of get it organized here on that one because there's something I have planned for August, and there's another thing I have planned in October, and I've kind of been juggling both of those. And then, of course, neither of those are the Derek Cope book. The Cope book is still kind of up in the air at the same time. We don't have any new news on a publisher. Hope to get something kind of going together on that. There's some other information from Sears Point I still need to integrate into it. So that's still in the works. It's just been a matter of prioritizing things at this point here. But I think it'll be good here. These next couple of weeks, I think we're going to kind of start checking things off and getting things where they need to be. So that'll be really exciting. So we'll get that going. Thank you also to those of you who are spreading word about 3 Before February. I know we had the anniversary of Kenny Irwin Jr.'s accident in 2000 this past week. And a lot of people I saw a lot of great comments in the video there and people sharing the video on that. I appreciate that. I'm glad that I got a lot of traffic after restarting the Tony Roper Memorial Scholarship Fund the previous Friday. Finally got that back on there. So now there are actual direct links to all 3 of those charitable funds between Victory Junction, the Kenny Irwin Jr. Foundation, and the Tony Roper Memorial Scholarship Fund. I also want to make very clear, big thanks to those of you. We actually had a couple donors to the Tony Roper Fund in addition to the initial $100 I put forward on there from the charity auction in 2019. So a big thanks to the both of them as well. And so we have, let me get this here. So we're getting that together, and yeah, definitely wanted to make sure that we got that on there. I know it's been a long time coming. I was trying to evaluate different options as to what would work well for that. And the goal that I put on there is just kind of it's really flexible. I just want to. I wasn't sure. I was hoping it wouldn't have to set any goal at all because I'd rather it just kind of be a constant thing. But I hope these two don't mind me mentioning their names because I want to definitely thank them again for sure. Kevin Nix and Zachary Beard, no relation. Big thanks to the both of them for contributing to the GoFundMe on that. I'll drop the link there in the description, and you can check that out there as well. I included the picture that I took at the 50 car at Texas back during the All-Star race as well. So we have all 3 of the foundations up there, and I'm glad 3 Before February got seen, so it got more attention to that as well, and I hope that keeps going there. So we got that. Let's see. Let's see. Where else are we on this? Okay, we did the Truck Series race. We'll probably get into the trivia here pretty soon. If you guys have any other questions, of course, don't hesitate to ask here in the chat, and we'll cover that as well. But pending this, again, let's see. Did we get the official Cup results yet? I got to see if we have an actually show if Stenhouse fell out. Oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, so the unofficial race results here show Stenhouse out of the race with suspension issues at the finish there. So it is listed as a DNF and not finishing under power. I know I'm going to have to update that in the article already to get that up for you guys tonight. Pending post-race inspection. Do we have anything from Pockrass on the announcement here? Let's see where we are on that. Cup owner points. Yeah, not seeing anything on this. Oh, this is interesting. Pockrass just tweeted 19 minutes ago that the people at the track are already removing the safer barrier from the track, preparing for the repave. Picture was just posted at 5:24 Pacific time here. Just 20 minutes ago from now, showing that they're removing some of that. Let me share the link to that as well. Those of you who are already following that, I can see here. Okay, let me get the actual link and make sure that gets in there. Wow, that's interesting. Check this out, folks. So you got a picture there. So yeah, they're already doing it. They took drive. It sounds like they really very very cursory taking that under consideration from the driver. I guess they can't wait too much there. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, well, I didn't think they were even going to start doing it until Monday. This is something, again, looking at for next year. I'm certainly looking forward to going to Fontana again for the first time since our what had originally been our last trackside coverage before the pandemic started. Because I'm very interested if they're going to start doing something like that when they convert that to a short track. That's going to be kind of a sad loss. I think that track has really weathered that surface a lot better, even with the seams and everything. But I don't know. That just seems to be the trajectory we're going here. It's just kind of experimental racetracks here, and so forth. Also, kudos to the folks over at the Live Fast Motorsports here. I decided to order one of their shirts here to support them because I about their team on this show. I know we talked about Kyle Tilley a little bit earlier here, but kudos to them. They actually sent a lanyard with the shirt here too. So big thanks to the folks over there at BJ and Bat Tiff's team there. I'd like to talk about them more, quite honestly. It's good to they're kind of in a ranking here where they're kind of working on finishing ahead of the Rick Ware team and the Starcom Racing team, and still trying to kind of catch up to the Anthony Alfredos and other second teams, Spire Motorsports cars and all that. They're kind of in that sweet spot here and trying to kind of get some better runs. Hopefully, in the second half of this year, they can get some good performance out there. But yeah, really like the design they did on this. It's very, very distinctive here. With the 78 there and really rebranding it since we last saw the number run with Furniture Row a couple of years ago. So if you're ever interested, definitely recommend checking them out there because they got some cool stuff in their one there. Yeah, exactly. The Vaporwave angle. I like that too. It's just something very different. I think, what was it? I think Alan Cavana did a segment there talking about the fact that teams are really kind of changing their approach to merch and kind of making things a little different. I like very much the all over print shirts and all that, like the one I wore last week with the Logano on it. But yeah, I like the different angles they're taking with some of these here. So kudos to them on that, and anything that gets their name out there is certainly a good thing to talk about. BJ's a great guy. He's never turned down an interview in the times I talked to him, even when he finished last at Darlington. Matt Tiff's a good kid too. I hate what happened with him that kind of forced him into this different role here instead of driving. I thought he had a couple decent runs, even with Front Row Motorsports driving in Phoenix and so forth. But it looks like they're able to kind of get a good organization together, and hopefully in the next gen era, they're able to keep building on that. Certainly running Fords, they're going to have one of the best looking cars of the current group of next gen cars next season. So I look forward to that. Let's see here. Okay, what's this? Okay. Did I even mention Austin Hill and congratulating him on the truck win? Yeah, congratulations to him. Another heartbreak for another Kyle Busch-related competitor, and Chandler Smith not quite being able to pull off the victory. That was too bad. It just seems like for some reason that 18 truck just doesn't get the great runs that the 4 and the 51 are able to. We saw this a lot last year with Christian Eckes. When he had that great run at Pocono, got in a wreck there. So many other times that, things just haven't quite worked out on that end. I hate it for Chandler Smith. It seems like they got some good talent over there that just, has one thing happen over another. But they still got a ways to go in the season. They got a ways till we get the Truck Series back before they run at Watkins Glen. But that's another one to look at there. I mentioned Chris Windham and the great run he had in the Michael Annett injury, so that was good. Jake Griffin, 12th place run there for the Realm Brothers effort. Great to see there. Danny Bone in the 10th spot. Tate Fogelman finally getting a top 10, even though his truck was overheating very early in the event. A little bit of the Randy Dorton effect there to get a powerful engine that could survive that kind of demands there to get his truck across the finish line there in the 9th spot after starting in 28th. But yeah, Morgan Alexander, your last place finisher. That feature and the feature on David Starr are already on the last page. We'll get the Cup Series article later tonight after the conclusion of post-race inspection. SRX comments. I mean, I've touched on it a little bit here and there in the show tonight. But yeah, I thought it was, I really enjoyed it. I haven't sat down to watch. I watched this one and I watched Knoxville a couple weeks ago. So kind of comparing, contrasting with the Truck Series race this past week. those are the only ones I actually sat down to watch live, and I enjoyed both of them. I thought they did a great job. I thought everybody just looks like they're having a lot of fun to be there. I'm kind of interested in Paul Tracy's angle with it, because I think it almost feels like professional wrestling a little bit. I think Paul is just trying to rile people up a little bit. I don't think he's actually angry at Ernie Francis Jr. or Haley Deegan or anybody like that, but he's kind of just sticking a knife in there, and knowing that somebody's got to wear the black hat. So that's fine. I think that's kind of cool. I think the cars look great. I think they did the right adjustments to put the names on the doors and things like that, to kind of step into the IROC role a little bit. And Slinger looks like a fantastic track. I would love to see like a super late model race there or something, and see how an even bigger field negotiates lap traffic around there. It makes me want to go back to our local track up at the Placerville Speedway. I'm thinking about doing that during one of these off weekends here coming up. So not in the media aspect, more in the fan aspect for that. But checking that out here in the meantime. So yeah, really enjoy what it does, and that's a good thing too, especially if they're going to do a few Saturday night races here during the whole time that people are going to short tracks in their local areas. I think it really does encourage people to look into that and learn more about their local, the people that are really good at their local tracks and so forth. That's great. I hope they kind of keep it, kind of shake it up too, and maybe go to some other venues next year that are different this year. I think that'd be really exciting. And I think they got a good thing going there. They got a good group. Everybody that's in it, even the broadcasters to the competitors, even people that are crashing out of the race, they just look like they're having so much of a good time. They can't really hide it. I love that they have Alan Bestwick. I love that they have Brad Daugherty. I think they're both doing a great job. Matt Yoakum. I mean, it's a great group, and the camera works good. The cars look awesome. I gotta say I'm enjoying it. And kudos again to our ARCA correspondent and our staff writer William Saki for doing the last place articles for that. I haven't had the time to do that, but I appreciate him taking that on here and doing that. It looks like that may be a more of a regular feature here for those future races. His feature on Slinger will be later this week, and we'll look into again, of course, the Nashville track next week with Bill Elliott and Chase. Bill seems like he's really struggled already. I think he's already locked up the last car SRX championship for this short season this year. But hopefully he gets a better run there running against his son next week. And that would be good to see. So that would be there. So who are you guys' favorite driver in the SRX series so far? I haven't really decided yet. I kind of like in terms of paint schemes, I kind of like the way, paint scheme is relative, but I like the bright yellow or the bright green color combinations, like Ernie Francis's car and Paul Tracy's look pretty cool. But in terms of the competitors themselves, actually both of them are pretty entertaining. I like a lot of people watching the series wasn't really that aware of Francis's resume. But I'm very impressed. As a Trans Am champion, and he's going in there, and he won IRP last week. I think it's outstanding. So it's good to see a mix of kind of younger and older competitors. I was hoping it was just going to be just older drivers there, but these other competitors are. They fit right in. And that's good to see, along with the local track champion and everybody too. I'd love to see who else they bring into it, and who else is going to compete in the series and everything. So, I'm enjoying it. So, I don't know if they're ever going to come out this direction. I guess they're staying with the Midwest thing. So that's pretty cool. Greg Biffle run the 69 car. So that's always fun. So that'll be another one too. We got official that Kurt Busch is the winner. Okay, that'd be good. So I guess we're locked in for the Stenhouse article. I guess that'll be kind of a shorter one. Yep, there it is. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the heads up here. Bob Pockers tweeted 3 minutes ago, tech complete. Kurt Busch is the winner. One missing loose lug nut on Bowman, Bell, DiBenedetto, Wallace. Monetary fine to each of the crew chiefs. Cars to the R&D, which are no penalties. Just to see what teams are doing. An engine dyno, those will be Martin Truex's car, Alex Bowman's, Tyler Reddick's, and Ryan Blaney. So congratulations to Kurt Busch for the win in today's Cup Series race. And unfortunately, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. now gets the third last place finish in a row for JTG Daugherty Racing, and his third in the last 6 races. So an unfortunate stretch of events here for the 47 team. Hopefully they can turn things around at New Hampshire before we go into the 2-week break. And that'll be something to kind of look forward to here as well. Marcus Lemonis tweeted Francis to come talk to him when he decides to go to trucks. That'd be exciting. Hey, more power to him. I think, again, he's made a believer out of me, and that's good to see. I might pick up one of their shirts too. I haven't decided which one, but I don't know. It's tricky. But yeah, I'm a big fan of supporting anything that I like seeing out there. That's for sure. Let's see. 47 finished 37. There you go. Right on. That might almost be the headline. I kind of like that, actually. So you got that too. All right. Let me get. Okay, we'll do some trivia questions here. Wow, we're already at an hour 40. My goodness. Okay, well, thank you for sticking around here, folks. I know it's been a longer show today, but we had a shorter one last week for the 4th of July here. Hope you had a good Independence Day for our American viewers here. And we'll go from there. So we'll do, again, the categories here. You guys can go ahead and pick which category you'd like. We'll do a couple questions just to round out the show this evening. The categories, again, are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are your categories. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. You can go ahead and pick in the comments below as you pick those. I don't have anything. Oh, shoot. I should have brought something for show and tell. I didn't have that. I guess I got this. I got my drink holder here. I already tweeted this a while back. Well, yeah, I guess I could do this. I already posted this, but I'm really tickled by this because they put some amazing detail into this. This rubber, it's like a well, I'm always spilling my drinks all the time. So something like this, it's a bit wider and a bit more stable. It works great. And yeah, it's got the 2003 era Ricky Craven logos on it there. I'll bring it a little closer there for the shot. And you can see they did a great job. They got like a Pontiac and it looks like an older Dodge emblazoned here. I'm not sure if you can see very well in the film there. We can see that they actually put the number and the Tide logo on the hood, showing him leading the way as he was in Darlington in March 16th of that year. Great design on this. I mean, it's kind of amazing the level of attention to detail on this. Not a regular fabric koozie. I'm not really a big fan of those because those seems to just fold up too easily. But something like this, it's a bit more sturdy. It keeps things cold pretty well, even if it's a I guess at this point it's about old enough to vote. So it works pretty well. So kudos again, and of course the Tide Ride. I mean, one of the all-time classics. I share a lot of people's frustration that Ricky Stenhouse's version of the throwback wasn't nearly as good, and that was certainly another aspect of it there. But yeah, I really liked how it came out back then, at least the old orange and white version. That's the only one, the only proper Tide paint job there. Hey there, Ufer. Welcome aboard. Glad you like the shirt. Thank you. All right. Alexander Green, a $10 stream. I'm not sure if I don't know if we'll ever do that. We'll probably. I almost thought of doing one during the delay if it was going to be a 2004 level thing there. But again, kudos to NASCAR or at least the track officials there for getting that cleaned up as quick as they did when they had the pothole there during the race. But yeah, Tide Pods. I was just thinking that. Yeah, exactly. Drinking out of something that has a Tide logo on it. That's probably why they had so many of these, is nobody wanted to, nobody liked the concept of making it look like you're drinking out of a detergent container. I guess they could have really gone too far on that. So yeah. Sid too. Thank you for the heads up. Yes, indeed. We did have a call on that. Yeah, Kurt Busch locked up the win and Stenhouse the last place finish for today's race. Tracks. Oh, Beast of Metal. Thanks again for. I might just put you on that duty there, Beast of Metal. Just keep track of the votes there. Tracks is 4, Wildcard 2, and Teams 1. So Tracks it is. All right. No, thank you for that. It saves me some time for sure. Castro Neves wants to get a ride at Daytona. That would be fun. Man, I have no idea. Oh, no tires, just gas. You're going to be in New Hampshire? Right on. Well, hey, if you get any pictures of the last place finisher, feel free to send them over, and I'd be happy to see. All right. Okay. Ooh, here we go. Here's a good question. This is actually kind of covering our next race. Next race I'm going to be covering in person is going to be at Las Vegas at the end of September. Already making preparations for that. Actually, what we're going to do is instead of going down, we live over again in Northern California here. Instead of kind of going down Highway 5, we're going to go into Nevada this time and kind of get some different shots. So, again, we're going to do the door magnet with the Patreon member names on the door and everything, and we'll get some shots in different locations. Last bro mentioned a museum that's over in Nevada. We're going to try to touch his bases out there, railway museum out there. So we want to check that out. It always seems like railways are kind of part of like all of our trips here, and that's certainly going to be the case this time. So we're going to check that out and then take a route down to Vegas late Thursday and begin the coverage for Friday through Sunday. So that'll be exciting. So more information on that coming up soon. And this question, the reason I mentioned that, this question is directly relevant to that too. First question, what driver led the most laps of the inaugural Las Vegas 400? What driver led the most laps of the inaugural Las Vegas 400? "24 Hours of Eldora." Wow, that sounds like fun. Marco Andretti wants to do Xfinity. That would be fun, man. I mean, after Santino has been doing so well, I think Sam Hunt would probably jump on that. The Sam Hunt team has done a really good job with him. I just grin ear to ear every race. Artie Fox, yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Hearing Alan Bestwick say those old names, I mean, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. It's really enjoyable, and they put on a good show. I'm serious though. I got to put that on my hype mix. I have a playlist of songs I love listening to, and I'm driving home from work on a race day or a day before a race there, and I'm gonna have to put that on the list. So that's a lot of fun. All righty. What driver led the most laps of the inaugural Las Vegas 400? And the answer is Mark Martin. Mark Martin, indeed. Alexander Green, you got it right off the bat. Joseph Galsworthy, Maserati 9, Zedhead 2, Jeff Abbott, Charles Peterson Jr. Yep, you were correct. Mark Martin, indeed. Yeah, drinking Tide, are you? Yep, there you go. Oh, gosh. I may bring back in future shows, again, with a couple of off weekends. I don't know what I'm going to do with the live streams there. I'll probably do at least one during that time and maybe bring back doing the OBS thing with the screen sharing in the background. I kind of like to experiment with that again. I was just disappointed that we didn't have the bandwidth to make that work that one time, and I don't want to have it keep dropping out here. But I am in the works, so I'm working on fixing that up, though. So I hope that we'll get to that point. All right. Next question here. What track? Oh, here we go. This is perfect. What track was the site of Bill Elliott's NASCAR Winston Cup debut? What track was the site of Bill Elliott's NASCAR Winston Cup debut? All right. What driver led the most laps in the inaugural race at Atlanta? Oh, good question. I'm afraid I'd have to look that one up. Yeah. Yeah, Ernie Francis Jr. If he ran, it's a serious point. Like, I mean, well, road courses or anything, especially now you got all these road courses in there. I think we're going to see some very interesting rookie classes if that stays the same for a couple more years. Especially if the next gen car has taken on kind of this almost, I don't want to say sports car angle, but more like a production Trans Am kind of thing. What track was the site of Bill Elliott's NASCAR Winston Cup debut? The answer is Rockingham, The Rock. How do you guys feel about the Chase Elliott documentary coming up? I know that's going to be pretty hype, I'm sure, if it's going to be that whole deal there. Atlanta, Charles Peterson Jr., I think you were the first one on that. Zedhead 2, right up there. Ultimate 23 Dragon, Jeff Abbott. DFS Vids. These are trickier questions. Atlanta sounds right, doesn't it? When they showed Bill Elliott's car, his first car from his first start, I thought it was funny because when Elliott came to Darlington, I think it was in 2019, and they were doing the throwback to that paint scheme, he said that car was a piece of crap. It was terrible. So that was entertaining. But he definitely got some faster cars further down the line. All right, next question. What Texas track was purchased by Japanese businessmen in 1991? What Texas track was purchased by Japanese businessmen in 1991? That's your next question. Yeah, and I really liked again, kudos to Junior on finally getting Jimmy Means on the show. It was only a matter of time, given that he was his favorite driver there. But I like that he talked about J.D. McDuffie, even mentioned Jimmy Bird in the interview. Jimmy was one of the people I interviewed for the J.D. book. So that was, that was a big thing on that. So, yeah, I really enjoyed listening to that interview this past week. I definitely recommend listening to it. Junior is really, again, I'm glad that he's taken this direction with this podcast where he's bringing on these veteran drivers, much like what Scene Vault podcast does too, because they do a great job in this same sense. What's cool with Junior's particular version of it is it reminds me so much of Winners when Neil Bonnet had his show before his tragic passing. It's good that I'm glad Junior is pretty much staying out of the driver's seat and just committing to this show and doing that similar angle to it. So that's been really good to see. And it's not just the people you would immediately expect. I mean, bringing Jimmy Spencer on, bringing Jimmy Means on, and so forth. It's good to hear. Mike Skinner's, I thought, was a great episode too. So that was cool. What Texas track was purchased by Japanese businessmen in 1991? The answer is indeed Texas World Speedway. I think pretty much all of you got that. Chase seems a bit young for a documentary. Very good point. Very good point. It's kind of, I think that's the tricky part with a lot of this is these drivers are such boy pilots these days. They're just so young. They already experienced so much at such a young age. I mean, you could do a Jeff Gordon one and it would have to be like The Last Dance. It would have to just be a massive event. He's still plugging away. He hasn't even started working as VP at Hendrick Motorsports yet and start that phase of his career. It's, but again, NASCAR is very clearly, wanting to make sure Chase Elliott stays the most popular driver and doing whatever they can to keep him up there. And he's got his fans, and I like that he's outspoken on some things and at the same time, which makes him kind of interesting in that sense. It is what it is. I'd rather that, kind of be done on other smaller teams and drivers that don't get talked about, but it is what it is. I mean, it's Bill Elliott. I mean, what do you do, So, all right, let's see. Here we go. Next question. What was the original name of the spring race held at the Rock? What was the original name of the spring race held at the Rock? Is our next question. Can't have a documentary on Rick Ware? Could. I basically even mine, I kind of merged that into the Carl Long one. There may be, in these field filler episodes, there may be some that kind of blur into other episodes to the point where by the time I would do a standalone one, it would kind of be redundant because you'd have pieces from every other episode. That's something I'm still kind of working on too for further down the road now that I'm kind of committed to really kind of expanding the series. It was just going to be on 2004 when I started it, which is why the Shelmerdine episode feels a little different than a lot of the ones after it. But yeah, now it's kind of, it's expanded to such a point that they all kind of overlap with each other, which is good. I mean, I'm glad I started it that way with a driver that, where the driving career kind of ended about the time that I ended it. I mean, there were a couple more years afterwards, but yeah. What was the original name of the spring race held at the Rock? The answer is the Peach Blossom 500. The Peach Blossom 500. I don't think anybody got that. Carolina 500 made sense to me. Peach Blossom 500. There, see, there you go. How well you can see that. There you go. It's a little better. Get it in the right focal length. All right. Jack Garland, I saw your question there about which Cup driver reminds me most of Ricky Rudd. I mean, it's hard to compare. Just somebody that's just an absolute, just real hard-headed kind of throwback kind of driver. Tough to say. It's hard to say. That's a very good question. I'm not sure if there's a suitable comparison because, I mean, Ricky Rudd was so typical of other drivers from that period when you had guys like Mark Martin and Rusty Wallace and, and so forth that were just tough as nails just in the same way. And then, of course, kind of hearkening back to the remnants of the generation before that with your Bobby Allisons, Kelly Yarboroughs, and so forth. I'm not sure if there is a suitable comparison. Yeah, hard to say. Yeah, very hard to say. Good question. All righty. Okay, here we go. Next question here. What is the second fastest qualifier for a race called? What is the second fastest qualifier for a race called? There's no intuitive reason for a human being to guess Peach Blossom. Yeah, no, I would not have guessed it at all. Absolutely not. The guy likes fruit and Powerpuff Girls. I don't know. Yeah, Peach Blossom. Peach Blossom. I would not have thought. I mean, again, I'm not from the area, so I don't know if Peach Blossoms are particularly prevalent in the Rockingham region. If you ate first, you're last. There you go. 210. Just watch Fatback on Scene Vault. There you go. Scene Vault. So I got to catch up on a lot of Scene Vault, though. I'm pretty much caught up on Junior, but yeah. What's the I almost gave it away. What's the second fastest qualifier for a race called? The answer is indeed the outside pole or the outside pole sitter. Pretty much all got that one. Set head 2. I think you were first on that. Oh, here we go. This question is kind of up for debate. But again, maybe from the time period, it's a bit more of an obvious answer. What track is famed for hosting the most outrageous pre-race shows? What track is famed for hosting the most outrageous pre-race shows? Yeah, think about that one. Somebody put E. All right. What track is famed for hosting the most outrageous pre-race shows? I already see a lot of Charlottes in the chat. I see a Vegas, a Texas, and a Talladega, too. And Daytona. Because what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. There you go. The drink of champions. Yeah, exactly. What track is famed for hosting the most outrageous pre-race shows? The answer is indeed Charlotte. Most of you got that. Humpy Wheeler. H.A. Humpy Wheeler. Absolutely behind that. So set head 2, you were the first on that one too. There you go. Supposed to sit around in ease with A Sports. It's in the game. It's in the game. There you go. I love that video where the guy actually finds the actual EA Sports guy at a golf course, and he just does it effortlessly. It looks like he's overdubbed, but it's just him, and it's the funniest thing. Oh man. Let's see. Here we go. What track was the site of Ernie Irvan's first win on a super speedway? What track was the site of Ernie Irvan's first win on a super speedway? Charlotte had 6-hour pre-race shows back then. Pretty much had to carry it over to another day, pretty much. Of course, if the 600 had to start, later in the day, I guess you had to fill it with something. What track was the site of Ernie Irvan's first win on a super speedway. I think somebody had video of qualifying at Charlotte in 1990. Somebody sent me the link to that, and they had a great video. You could see that they had like the Robosaurus thing, the car-eating dinosaur that was staged over there. So that was pretty cool. They had some promotion you could hear over the PA in the background. So this is good times. Good times. What track was the site of Ernie Irvan's first win on a super speedway? You got Daytona, tons of Daytonas, and the answer is indeed Daytona, the 1991 Daytona 500. Was it Charlotte jumping the bus? There you go. All right. What am I looking at? Okay, that was the results from earlier. Here we go. Here's a history question. Who was president of the United States when Daytona hosted its first 500-mile race? Don't look it up. Try to guess. Those of you presidential-minded here. Who was president of the United States when Daytona hosted its first 500-mile race? Got a nice rhyme to it. Who was president of the United States when Daytona hosted its first 500-mile race? All right, I'm seeing a lot of Ikes. I'm seeing a Truman. I'm seeing a Kennedy. And the answer is indeed Dwight D. Eisenhower. Absolutely. Eisenhower, absolutely. There you go. Okay, hang on. Let's see. Okay. Next question. We'll just do a couple more here. We'll wrap up for this evening. What current Winston Cup track is also home for a Harley-Davidson test facility? I said Davison, thinking of James Davison. Let me read that again. What current Winston Cup track is also home for a Harley-Davidson test facility? DFS vids. Yeah, Ernie Irvan did run in the 4-car for a lot of his career. His first starts, though, were actually with, I think, with DK Ulrich in the 56. And then he had a car that was sponsored by Dale Earnhardt. There's interesting stories on that. But the 4-car was the first one he won with. He took over that ride in 1990. For those of you if you check out the Scene Vault podcast on Phil Parsons, you get another part of that story. And I think, well, I guess Larry McClure has the other part of it for that. What current Winston Cup track is also home for a Harley-Davidson test facility? Sounds like Daytona because of Bike Week. I got Texas, Loudon, Michigan, Charlotte, the Glen, New Hampshire, Phoenix. The answer is Talladega. Talladega is the correct answer. Talladega. Anybody get that? Ooh, I don't know. Texas? Yeah, a lot of the Texas guesses are good, but it must just be before they opened or maybe right at, well, no, I guess, yeah, it's 90, 97, 98, 99, so it would be open by that point. Texas, Hampshire, Daytona, Sonoma, Phoenix. Yeah, I don't think you got anybody on that one. Wow. Yeah, there you go. All righty. There's something else I was going to discuss. I couldn't remember what it was. I got to make an actual list of notes here. I try to just pop off the top of my head for most of this here, but yeah, I brought up the Norm video. Gosh, yeah, I can't remember. Yeah. Look early. It'll probably come up in a later show here. Alrighty. Let's see. Which track hosts the headquarters of MRN Radio? Which track hosts the headquarters of MRN Radio? Have I seen any of the Lost Speedway episodes? Not yet. Not yet. I did see the new Fast and the Furious movie yesterday. It's all right. It's all right. You can go into it with low expectations, and you'll be satisfied on that. First movie I've seen since I saw the Sonic movie, the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, right before the pandemic in like March of 2020. Haven't been to a theater since then, so that was a weird thing just for the novelty of it. But yeah, actually another theater not far from us here actually closed during all of that. So that's been just a whole weird experience. What track hosts the headquarters of MRN Radio? We had several guests for Charlotte, Atlanta, Daytona, Bristol. Alrighty. And the answer is indeed Daytona. Daytona is the correct answer. Charlotte, Atlanta, yeah. Oofer, I think you were the first one on that one. James Malloy, Charles Peterson Jr., Stephen C., Bean Boy 89, and then several ones from here. Jonathan Wyatt. There you go. Let's see. I think we've had some of these before. All righty. Okay, so we'll do one more question here for tonight, then we'll wrap up the show for this evening here. So thank you again for everyone for tuning in. Last question for tonight. Who sold Bruton Smith the land Texas Motor Speedway was built on? Who sold Bruton Smith the land Texas Motor Speedway was built on? So yeah, chew on that one there. Yeah, Russell Martin. That's one of the other problems with those movies. Yeah. I like Tokyo Drift. I mean, that one was just, I think everybody seems to really enjoy that one. But yeah. I think a lot of these later ones, it just gets kind of exhausting. Who sold Bruton Smith the land Texas Motor Speedway was built on? Yeah, great soundtrack, too, on some of those. All right, we got guesses for Jerry Jones, SMI, Bill France Jr., Ross Perot, Boss Hogg, Nyaun Ryder, George Bush, Johnson & Johnson, SMI, Farmer Brown. Who sold Bruton Smith the land Texas Motor Speedway was built on? Last question of the evening. Here comes the answer. The answer is indeed Ross Perot. How about that? We had a couple presidential questions in here. That was a bit unexpected. But Ross Perot, indeed the correct answer. Stephen C., were you the first? Zachary Leffler, I think you were. Maserati 9. Maserati 9, there you go. Well, hey, shoot, I didn't even know that. Going over to the track there last month. It was like, you go on some of Ross Perot's land. Well, how about that? Well, there you go. Well, what a small world it is. Well, there you go. Well, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. That'll do it for our show tonight. We're already over 2 hours here, but I appreciate you guys tuning in here. Thank you again for your support, both of myself and lastcar.info here. For more content, check out my Twitter feed at LastCarOnBrock. Website, of course, is lastcar.info. And if you're interested in anything in the Patreon, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. Our next show is going to be next week after the action at the Magic Mile. in New Hampshire, which will be the last race before a couple-week break leading into Watkins Glen. And yeah, not sure what is going to happen here this next week, but we'll be back here to cover that after the action a week from tonight. So have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next time.